the audience. We're going to start with the pledge, and I believe Evan's going to lead us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hi.
These are our 2016-2017 leaders and some helper fill-ins for the Council Rock North Marching Band. And we're going to perform for you tonight a little bit of our competition show for the 2016-2017, which we have entitled Echoes. And you'll hear, this is our second movement. It's a piece called Renewing Vows by Wynton Marsalis. And we took it and made some fun little changes to it to make it sound echo-y. And it's supposed to represent that time in childhood, that first time when you realize what an echo can be, and you have a whole lot of fun with it, and it's something fun. And if you really like what you hear here, obviously we play at all the football games, and there's a marching band invitational coming up in October, on October 8th. South is hosting this year, but I figured I'd give a plug for John Burns down south and his program. So come on out and enjoy all the local area marching bands as they come to Walton Snyder Stadium on October 8th. I believe it's 6 p.m. start. All right. So without further ado, Evan will lead our group of leadership here in part 2 of our show, which we call Fun. So come on out and see us. Thank you for having us here. Thank you for everything, and have a good night.
Fantastic. Mr. Bishop, hang on, gang, hang on. Mr. Bishop, Evan, great job. You guys are the officers, right? Band officers, you guys are awesome. Really? That was fantastic. Is that a sneak peek of October 8th?
This is a sneak peek. Yeah.
That's a Sunday, right?
That's a Saturday.
Saturday?
Yes.
Saturday, October 8th, 6 p.m.
I believe it's 6 p.m.
Walt Snyder Stadium.
Snyder Stadium.
All right, folks should be there.
Y'all are right sharp too.
What a great start to our school board meeting. Thanks, everyone. Great job, Evan. Thanks.
Madam Secretary, member roll call, please.
Mrs. Brooks? Here. Dr. Foster?
I am here.
Mr. Grubb?
Mr. Grubb is away on business.
Ms. McKessie?
Mrs. McKessie is also away on business.
Okay, Mr. Tate?
Present.
Mrs. Thomas? Here. Dr. Thorwald?
Here.
Mr. Block?
Here.
Mr. Bileck?
Here.
Dr. Frazier, superintendent's report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Block, and good evening, everyone. One of the great things this school year in being up and running, and now it officially feels like we're up and running after seeing the North Band officers perform for us, is this year's district charity is the Travis Manion Foundation. And we have already seen such amazing work taking place on behalf of this foundation by our students and our staff. This year's foundation is a little bit different as opposed to some of ours in the past. In the past, they've mostly been about fundraising. And this year's will have a fundraising component as well. But this year's is also largely about community service as well as character development. I just have to tell you, just a few short days into this school year, how incredibly impressed I have been, again, with both the children of this school district as well as the adults of this school district. We have clubs already established in both of our high schools due to student interest, and we have advisors for those clubs, and we have activities already planned at the elementary level, the middle, and the high school level. It's really just fantastic. So we haven't even had a chance yet for our core team as a school district to meet with their leadership team from the foundation yet, and we already have this amazing work going on all throughout the school district. So truly, it's fantastic to see. And when people talk about and think about the youth of this country, at least when you think about the youth of this community, you should be thinking very good things. It's really fantastic to see, and much more good news to come on that topic as we go through this school year. Also this evening, I am very pleased to announce that the United States Department of Education has selected our school district as a host site for the Green Strides Tour. This is happening because our school district was named as a Green Ribbon School District in the spring of 2014. It's quite an honor for us as a school district, so we will be hosting an event with some education department officials from Washington, D.C., as well as Pennsylvania Department of Education officials on Wednesday, September 28th. We've selected Goodnoe Elementary as our host site, so Mr. Taylor here has been involved in that work. Renee Devlin, our science coordinator, and leader of our green team in the school district, has also been very heavily involved in that work. So it's quite a feather in our cap as a school district to be selected for that tour. And finally, here this evening, I'll let you know that our next school board meeting will be in October. And what that means is it will be time for our administration's annual report on master capital planning. So what the board as well as the community should expect next month is an update on all things master capital planning around process, timeline, and action planning over the next really 2 years on our road to 2018. So we'll be talking about the construction that's currently going on. We'll be talking about the right number of elementary schools to have in the school district, K-12 redistricting plan in the school district, as well as taking a look at some of the facilities that potentially might be repurposed here in the school district over the next 2 to 3 school years. So again, it'll largely be around timeline, action planning. So be on the lookout for that here at our next meeting in October. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. We'll move to public comment. Public comment's an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We would ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching this broadcast live on CRTV when you're speaking. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of our community have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Corporal Paul Deppy. I'm a corporal with the Newtown Township Police Department. And also I'm a Council Rock graduate and a member of the Council Rock marching band before it was North and South split. So I'm dating myself, but and also a proud graduate of Holland Junior High. So thank you for having me out tonight. I came out tonight to talk to you about something a program we have in the department called Coffee with a Cop. Dr. Frazier was nice enough to come out last year for our program. This is a national initiative spearheaded by Hawthorne, California Police Department. It's taken a few years to come out to the East Coast, but the Department of Justice has adopted it. And it gives residents an opportunity to come out, just have a cup of coffee with an officer, speak with an officer. If there's something they may not feel comfortable with coming up to the police station, or there may just be something as far as traffic. We did get some comments last year regarding school bus areas. You know, we have more patrols. Our school bus pickup is 7:15, and we're having problems with speeding vehicles. So just something small, but just a chance to come out and talk with an officer, to say thank you, have a cup of coffee. This is going to be tomorrow morning. I know it's short notice, but I wanted to get out to the school board meeting at the Corner Bakery on West Road. Chief Pasqualini asked me to come out to speak with you guys, just give you a heads up of what we're doing, and just come out, say hello, and speak with an officer, shake their hand. If you don't have anything that you want to share, but just to come out. And I think now more than ever, I grew up in this area, and when I grew up and I went to high school, the officers were there was a lot more community involvement. The officers were approachable, and I think we've gotten away with this from this program, and with the way things are going in the country towards law enforcement. We want to try to bridge that gap towards not only our students, but also to our adults in the community and our school board members. So we hope you guys will come out on your way to work to stop by, have a cup of coffee, and just say hello, and we'd love to have you. And also, just to give you a heads up too, I wanted to mention we have been out actively patrolling for at the school bus drop-offs through the school zones throughout the township. The chiefs had us out doing some details, get a chance to talk to the children and the bus drivers, and welcoming them back to the school. So, any questions? All right, thank you for having me. Have a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Corporal Deppy. We appreciate what you and the entire department and all of our departments do.
Thank you. We very much appreciate your
Coming out.
support. Take care. Thank you.
Nancy Carroll. I thought you had your own newspaper when you were at the press table.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. At tonight's meeting, you will be discussing how many meetings you will have a month. Indications from past discussions is that you will be voting to go down to the 1 meeting a month. You are also on track to start a capital planning discussion this fall on the redistricting that will occur in 2018. A redistricting that you have said will balance the enrollment at the middle and high schools, and hopefully, from my viewpoint, close an elementary school and end the rental at the law school in Newtown. I'm asking that before you vote to go down the 1 meeting a month path, that you discuss the process for all capital planning discussions between now and September 2018. Will these discussions be sandwiched into the once a month school board meeting? Will the discussions occur over time as standalone meetings? After examination of the September enrollment, the data supports the decisions that you have already made. Equalizing the desperate enrollment of both high schools is the right thing to do. Closing the middle school and keeping all students together, K to 12, is the right thing to do. The enrollment also indicates that closing the smallest elementary school, Wrightstown, that has 215 students, is not only possible, but is the right thing to do. Spending the money saved on technology is not only possible, but will benefit all students and is the right thing to do. The current enrollment does not support building a 700-seat school on the House track. The current enrollment does not support closing Rolling Hills, especially since the enrollment is up slightly at Rolling Hills and its neighboring schools, Hillcrest and Holland. So I'm asking you, the school board, to have the decisions about elementary school outside the regular school board meetings and to give parents and students plenty of notice about in the 2016-17 school year about the changes that will come in September 2018, because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there any further public comment? Okay, with that, we'll move to our discussion item, and that is the restructuring of our school board meetings to go to one regular meeting per month. Just to be clear, that doesn't mean that we will be meeting less. We will, in fact, potentially be meeting more. And outside of the schedule we'll talk about this evening, the board at any time can call a special meeting to deal with big projects, big topics. Before I summarize, I want to acknowledge a couple folks who have spent a significant amount of time working with the feedback we've got and digging into what that feedback is to bring us to where we are tonight. Certainly Dr. Frazier, Mr. Cox, but also Mr. Tate, Mr. Bialik have done a lot of work behind the scenes to get us to where we are today. So what I want to do is just summarize what the idea of moving to one regular meeting a month is, and that's really with a goal of improving the efficiency of all of our meetings. The benefits are to allow more focus on priorities, get better outcomes for students, our staff, our taxpayers, ultimately to save a little bit of money and be respectful of our administrators' time while continuing to provide for the highest levels of transparency for our public, and really making sure that all of our meetings work together to that end. Requirements of the administration and the board. We as board members must respect the role of the administration and actions of the committees to support the consent agenda, which is going to be the key to making this all possible and freeing up time in regular board meetings to discuss big academic and operational issues. We're going to need to make sure that we focus our board commentary on meaningful items, and to ensure that we've got high levels of preparation. We'll need the appropriate, and for not only us, but for the public, we'll need appropriate lead times on our agendas with supporting detail and final form for all regular and committee meetings. So in terms of what we talked about delivering for final consideration today is, number one, potential policy changes to facilitate this change, a revised calendar of meetings to reflect the change, and finally, the recommendation for use of the committees to facilitate the work of the board through the consent agenda to make time for focus on our strategic priorities. So we'll deliver that now and then look to drive some board conversation. We'll start with Mr. Tate to talk about the policy changes to accommodate.
The policy changes are fairly simple. It's just changing wording so that no longer does the policy say that we're meeting twice a month except for summer. We'll be moving to change the wording so that it specifies once a month. I think a much more significant change has to do with the functioning of the committees. The language change will say that committee meetings are working sessions to allow in-depth discussions, and I think that's an important point to keep in mind. I think committee meetings are a much better venue for diving deep into issues and really working through issues in detail, as opposed to the full board meetings. The change in language also specifies, as Andy was discussing, the lead time that's required. The language is going to be added to say that the agenda for each committee meeting, the agenda will be posted at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting to the publicly accessible location on the CRSD.org website to permit the public and members of the board to review in advance the topics and the content of the meeting. So I think that'll help make committee meetings even that much more effective. And finally, if I may, you alluded to the idea, and Mrs. Carroll raised the question of special meetings. Certainly when we are wrestling with big issues such as redistricting, I anticipate that, and we've discussed it, that there will be the necessity for special meetings. And I think that's a given. So the policy changes are rather straightforward.
and we'll be voting. I'll make that motion in a few minutes. Additionally, as we're getting into the comprehensive review of all of our policies that we've discussed previously, this policy will be in the very first section that gets reviewed. So we will be taking another crack at this policy in the next couple of months. So that'll give us an opportunity for any further adjustment. You know, it'll be a work in progress, but I think it's a good step forward.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. With that, we'll move to the recommended calendar.
Thanks, Mr. Block. I believe everyone has a copy of this proposed schedule in front of you. In a nutshell, what is being proposed is as follows. The board will certainly continue to meet the first 4 Thursdays of each month, just as it historically has. So there is no change there. I think that's just very important for the public to understand, is that the board has historically met the first 4 Thursdays and will continue to do so. The board business meeting would take place under this proposed calendar on the 3rd Thursday of each month. Right now, there's a board business meeting on the 1st and 3rd Thursday. So this would be on the 3rd Thursday of each month. We will continue to operate the Academic Standards Committee, the Facilities Committee, as well as the Finance Committee. We have historically operated all 3 of those committees. We will continue to operate all 3 of those committees. In addition to those 3, we will begin to formally and publicly operate on a monthly basis a policy committee. And it's for the reasons that Mr. Tate just noted. We have engaged with PSBA on a very large and robust policy review process. We have a total of about 280 or so policies to review over the next 2 years. So we're going to average 10 plus policies to be reviewed per month for the next 2 years. So that warrants its own monthly committee meeting on a monthly basis. So the sequence of meetings, as we think about the 4 Thursdays, would be as follows. The first Thursday would be stacked meetings. So we would first have the Facilities Committee, followed by the Finance Committee. So we would operate 2 committee meetings on the first Thursday of each month. The second Thursday would be Academic Standards Committee. The third Thursday, as noted, would be the board business meeting. And then the 4th Thursday would be the policy committee. So that would be our typical sequence that we would follow. To note just a bit, what I'll say is the 4 nights out is for any board is a lot. 5 is almost unheard of. So 4, I would say, is probably the upper limit. You certainly see some boards that are out 3 nights a month. 4 is not unheard of, but 4 is the upper limit. Stacking facilities and finance really becomes necessary for us to stay at that upper limit of 4 nights in a given month. And stacking those 2 committees certainly has indeed proven to be successful elsewhere. In fact, we can look at a neighboring school district that has 19,000 students and 23 schools who operates precisely this way. Both Mr. Taylor as well as Mr. Reinhardt reached out to their counterparts in that school district to find out whether it works and works well. And the reports that they received back were quite favorable. So that was good news for us. In addition, we know of a number of school districts our size and successful school districts who actually don't even operate these 2 committees as separate committees. They combine them together each and every month. So we're not proposing to do that. We're still suggesting that typically we operate these as separate committees, but that we do stack them on that first Thursday each month. So certainly there are successful models out there that we can take a look at. So what the schedule does is it provides us with the opportunity to become more efficient. As has been noted, certainly no transparency will be lost, as all 4 evenings in their entirety are recorded and archived in one capacity or another. And if we gain crispness, both on the administration end as well as on the board end, then in my viewpoint, this schedule certainly will work. In fact, there are lesser versions of this schedule that work elsewhere, and I don't have any doubts that this proposed schedule before us will be able to work for us. So the schedule that you have in front of us, there are 2 dates on here that I would point to you to specifically take a look at. One of them is January 26th. You see that is the 4th Thursday in January, and you note that we do have a schedule there, and that's simply because we have an administrative scheduling issue at that particular time. So that is an exception to our typical sequence of meetings. And then you also note the first week of December, we have a TBD in there to be determined for the board reorganization meeting. That does need to happen the first week in December. So we've sort of slotted the committee meetings and the board meeting in the 4 weeks of December that we have available to us, but we have not definitively slotted as of yet that board reorganization meeting. And so we'll need to do that as well. So just to point that out to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frazier. Are there any questions about the calendar that we have? We'll take those now. We'll move to the policy questions when we get to most of Ms. Thomas.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of facility and finance on the same night. And starting at 6:30 is challenging at best. 2 of our 4 Thursday nights, we get to start at 7:30. I really feel like I thought part of this was to make this more manageable for board members as well. And I don't think there's a necessity to start before 7. So we've had facility and finance on the same. We had so much time when we were here till midnight that we moved them. So we're going back to something that didn't work for us in the past. So I'd rather have 5 nights personally, but at a minimum, I'd like to see a starting time at 7. Many of us are killing ourselves to get here by 6:30, and we have jobs. And for me to get here at 6:30, I have to leave 4:30. And so, it's not all about me. I'm putting it out there for everyone else. But I'd like to see things start at 7, and I'm not a fan of any 2 committees in one night. I am a fan of the 1 board meeting a month, however.
Anyone else have a comment? Mr. Wiley?
Yeah, I agree with those concerns. I'm not sure what the answer is, so I hate to raise an objection without an answer. But if we have to stack the meetings, I would rather swallow a later start than trying to start at 6:30. We've got to work on we're going to talk about this a lot, but we got to work on our efficiencies. So there's absolutely no reason that we have to be here until 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Everyone's got to keep ourselves in check. And again, we'll talk more about that, but I'd like to see those meetings pushed back a bit because, starting at 6:30, and I don't have the commute like Jerry, Wendy, a lot of people do, but I still find it hard to get, I'm 6 streets over. I still find it hard to get here by 6:30. And it usually means that I'm skipping dinner and it's hard to concentrate and I get cranky. So,
That's it.
So they're my thoughts on the calendar.
I agree. It is a challenge for me to get to meetings early, so if we can start at 7, it would be better. The point is not lost on me at what Wendy said. We had stacked finance and facilities meetings, and there was a reason why we unstacked them. That being said, it was a while ago. Dr. Frazier wasn't here at the time. And, the whole culture of one meeting didn't exist. So I guess I'd be willing to try it, but I think that we have to be really self-reflective. And if we have a month and it's a problem, or 2 months and it's a problem, then it's not going to work. And I don't want to say we've committed to this whole year and then we have to wait, till next school year to revise it. there, particularly in area facilities, since we're about to start this or restart this conversation on capital planning, those meetings might be the most attended meetings, the most concerning meetings for members of the public. And so I guess we have to see what those agendas look like. So maybe we need to be preemptive and switch it to a different day. But I do have some concern because, you know, academic standards was always limited to a time frame. So I'm delighted by this, that it's going to get its own night, but now we're just moving that problem onto another committee. And so I am concerned.
I know I had a turn to talk, but I'm just, the thought that comes to me is that we're supposed to have now the conversations we currently have in committee and at the board table in committee. And so if I'm sitting there and it's facilities and it starts at 7 and it's 8 and finance is supposed to start, and I have 3 more questions, I gotta wait, I gotta debate, can I even ask them? And yet it's not really gonna come before me again in a board meeting where I have more time. So it's almost, for me, the concern, I'll try it for October, we can see, but the constraint for me is every question I have needs to get answered in committee, because hopefully when it comes to the board table, I'm not gonna have a 2-hour discussion on a low bid for a pipe, right? So I don't wanna feel like I don't have enough time in committee and then be expected to vote on a consent agenda item 2 weeks later because committee got rushed because the next committee was starting. And that's where I'm having a thought process issue. But
That's fair, and I think that, just to address a couple of these, and I'm going to come over here. The first thing is, one of the big differences around use of committee here is a minimum of 48-hour lead time on agenda and on materials that are complete in their detail. And that gives board members the opportunity to review rather than have to consider on the fly as we have in the past. And I think it's incumbent on us, on board members, to review, and where we do have questions, potentially share those questions with the committees so that those questions can be answered, if you will, in the discussion. So that might just be one way using that specific example. It might not be that way all the time. Your concern is really valid. And from that standpoint, I would say this is something that we're gonna have to grow into. And there's nothing that is absolutely set in stone. I think we're gonna learn as we go through these, but Ms. Brooks and Mr. Bike, we've got to police ourselves. For me, from a timing standpoint, 6:30 is better for me. I prefer to start early and police ourselves and get out early. But that's me. I think, we've already heard from 4 people, heard from 3, and I know one other one. So I think there we kind of got to go with the will of the board. But I would ask everybody to think about it. It's not just us. We're the ones doing the work, but we're also here as a team of 17 with our administrators. So, I would also be concerned about thinking about their time. But when we come to this side, see what you gentlemen have to. Dr. Thorwald, yeah.
I've already voiced my concerns to Dr. Frazier about the 6:30 meetings being a challenge. SEPT is broken, just so you know, and it's
Let's take on that too.
It's difficult to get up here, and that requires a 4:30 lead for me too, because beyond that, if we can get more efficient, you've heard from me. Let's try it. I'm good to go. I would like to see a slightly later start time, but I'm one voice.
Well, I hear a lot of voices saying it. The one thing I forgot to mention is, and I was listening to Wendy's comments, we are going to have a lot to discuss with capital planning that's going to come within facilities. But the reality, I believe, of that situation is that some of those discussions around school consolidation, redistricting, the big questions, I don't expect that we'll be solving big questions, tackling big issues in committee. My thought, and I could be completely wrong, is that those will come out as special meetings or give us the time in the full board meetings to tackle that stuff. I see the committees facilitating the operational role of the board, so the things that typically could bog us down in both committee and here are tackled there. So I didn't mean to jump into you guys again, but I wanted to just
Are we going to talk about how this process is going to work?
Yeah, we're going to get to that. That's the third piece. So we're just focused on the calendar now. Mr. Tate, Dr. Foster, you want to go first?
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, especially in budget season, the finance meetings can run long, and there's every reason to believe, sadly, that this year's budget season will be a difficult one. It's kind of in our stars. And then we have this capital planning activity that really will leak in. There's no way to keep it out. It will be showing up. And so we did live through the stack committees before, and they were problematic going late into the night. It's either a great way to get something rushed through that you want, or a bad way. It's probably not good. And so when you look at our palette here, honestly, we have this review of policies from PSBA, but the grim reality of that is we're relying on PSBA attorneys to create, relative to federal and state law, policies that they have thoroughly vetted. Odds are extremely high, given my experience with this board, that those policies will either sail through with the most minor imaginable adjustments possible, or they will hit a brick wall that will last forever, maybe. So if you were going to stack a committee, I would say stack policy, or use policy to go into the modern era. Our teachers are using, Google Classroom left, right, and center these days, it seems, which is great. These documents can be read and reviewed mostly online. That's my recommendation. We need to find a solution. As Mr. Violet said, that's the only one that comes to mind. Stack policy and destack facilities and finance. I think they need to be separate, given what we're facing in the budget. So, thanks.
Can I just ask you a question?
Yes.
Since you mentioned that, I think some people might be thinking, just food for thought. I'm not suggesting we change off of what you said, but if we were going to stack rather than say you've got to stack these two, would it be feasible to look at the agendas for each during the month to see if it didn't work out the same every month? You know what I mean?
Dynamic, just-in-time stacking.
If one was, this happens to be light, so we'll put it with this one. I don't know if that is, works for the way you guys have to prepare for those. So, I'm not suggesting you come off what you're saying and all right, Mr. Tate.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Mr. Block. Staff are going to be assigned to each of the, well, of course, staff are assigned to each committee, and staff has been assigned to the policy committee. So adjusting it on a monthly basis would sort of play havoc with their schedules too. But to Bill's point, much of the work of the PSBA process will be online. As a matter of fact, Mr. Frederickson and I are getting trained tomorrow by PSBA on how the online system is going to work. So that's going to make it, bring it a little bit closer to the 20th century. And, going into this process, I think everybody realizes, and Dr. Fraser's done an excellent job of emphasizing the fact that we have a huge number of policies to consider, and we're going to have to be really diligent about this process and, avoid the temptation to wordsmith and so forth. But each policy that we get from PSBA will be marked up in ways to bring it into compliance with current law. But it'll be up to us to see that we've customized policy as needed with Mr. Cox's assistance and Dr. Fraser to fit Council Rock School District. So all policies will be reviewed with that in mind. And the other thing is we're going to be working off existing policy, which already to some degree is individualized or customized for Council Rock. So I'm confident that won't be an issue. It's not going to be a cookie cutter process where we're simply taking PSBA policy and ratifying. But, if you want
Can I
to
ask a
stack policy
question?
committee, I'm open.
I mean, I just wanted to say.
Hang on, Bill, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mr. Tate, did you make a comment in there about start time at all?
I do not.
Do you have a preference?
I'm flexible.
Okay, Ms. Brooks, I'm going to come to you, then I'll come to Dr. Foster.
My question is it necessary to have policy every month? Because I'm wondering if we alternated it and just did policy every other month, then we would only have stacked meetings every other month. So it would spread it out a little bit more, so the number of stacked meetings, like for example, in November, we don't have a choice because of Thanksgiving, we've lost a Thursday. So historically, we've stacked that even after we were no longer stacking. But I'm just saying, so rather than, can we juggle it around, flex the schedule a little bit so that maybe policy is not meeting every month, particularly around budget time? Or as you get ready for your October meeting and you see the timeline of what capital planning is looking like, if you know that we're approaching a threshold in February, maybe that's not a good time to stack and give each one, you know what I mean? Like, so maybe you can just get a little creative to not shortchange policy, but maybe, you can work on a frame of mind where it may not be every month, but certainly far more often than it's been, as a short-term solution.
I think if it was 2 years from now, the answer would be absolutely. The issue for us is that we've engaged into this agreement. So if we want to hold true to that agreement and see that work through, I've been through that work before. One night a month was not enough. So to talk about having just one night is actually ambitious relative to what I've seen before.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about 10 plus policies a month. It's probably right around 12 is what we're looking at on average, every single month for 2 years. So it's just,
That's fair.
it's a substantial body of work.
And that'd be
So-
one of our biggest roles.
So again, if it was 2 years from now, absolutely. This whole thing cleans up, it opens up,
That's
and it becomes much easier. But we're stuck at this point in time.
Dr. Foster?
I'm reluctant to say it, but it's just the honest truth. I've been on the school board for 5 years. I've never seen the school board create on its own a new policy on anything. I've seen the solicitors create policy. I've seen PSBA create policy. I've seen the school board tweak the wording here and there on policies, but I've never seen the school board create de novo any policy. So really, the school board is relying a tremendous amount on what it gets from PSBA. And for the school board, just imagine, we are going to wordsmith and craft, say, a 5-page document. It's not going to happen. I mean, just imagine it. So either those 5 pages from the PSBA with the cross citations to state law are in the neighborhood of correct, or it's just not going to move forward. So I think we have to have realistic expectations based on the past practice that we've seen in the school board. So either those policies are almost good to go and there's very minor changes, or it's just not, we're not creating policy. We're not. We're looking at it, we're ratifying it, we're cross-checking it, we're strip mining our way through. We're not really crafting it from scratch. If we were, that's a completely different undertaking. But 10 policies a month that really are largely already written and that we just need to see, do they fit our schema? So for instance, PSBA is completely reorganizing the architecture of these policies. Instead of being into 3 different buckets, they're being in one bucket relative to the different classes of employees. We're accepting that entire structure from the get-go. So, I just want us to think about how much time does it make sense for us to be in a room talking about these policies? How much value add is this group going to provide other than, yeah, the solicitor's okay with it, it looks basically correct, it clearly covers us and guides us through respect to state law and federal law, let's go. And when they fall short, we saw that happen with the suicide one, right? And with the child abuse. We thought we had concerns that we weren't okay with it. And guess what? We ended up landing on what PSBA gave us, because after we cross-checked with our solicitor, it turned out, you know what? They thought it through pretty good. It took a couple of months to do that cycle, but we sure as heck didn't write our own. So that's the experience I've had. So let's not give it too much time.
You know, in a minute, I'm going to give a report on the consensus of the board, well, the feedback I got from the board members, and I would be interested to see if it would be any different from this conversation, because, you know, a solution to this issue is that not every one of us has to attend every committee meeting. And we can structure, and we can volunteer for the committee meetings that fit our interests and fit our schedules. So I think that an answer may be that if there's some trust among the board members, that we may be able to get this work done. Divide up the work. There's 9 of us. Divide up the work. And that's a real easy step towards efficiency. I'll tell you that is not the will of the board, but maybe we can work towards that.
Dr. Frazier, do you have any thoughts?
Well, a question, first of all, in terms of start time. 6:30 committee start time is one that I inherited. When did the district start with the 6:30 start time? How long have we been with that practice?
It depends, it's moved around.
Okay.
We've had 6:30, we've had 6, we've had 7. It's been a topic of conversation, but some people want 6, some people want 7, so 6:30 ended. But in the 8.5 years I've been on the board, it's varied from 6 to 6:30 to 7. So it has not been, to my way of thinking, a firm commitment. When you do 2 committees in a night, in an effort to not be here till 1 a.m. But, you know, I've heard from several other board members as well as myself that 6:30 has become, I mean, we had executive session at 7 tonight. I walked in at 7:25. 6:30, and again, it's one person, so I guess there's 4 or 5 of us, but my thing is, if we're having one committee meeting, I think we could start at 7. I mean, you know.
Yeah, as I'm asking only because when we redid the schedule originally for the 16-17 school year, I didn't hear that at all from anyone. So we're hearing that now.
I think if there's 2 meetings in a night, then I'm just gonna have to be late, and I'm just gonna have to make that sacrifice when I have to. My thought
Sure.
that moving to this improved some of the issues I was having.
Right.
So in fairness, you're right. I didn't bring it up because I didn't feel there was a place to do that.
Right.
I do think it's a fair conversation of what Mark said, although if it's not the will of the board, I'm in favor of having assigned members. If the assigned group can meet at 6:30 and I'm not on that, I would expect you to go ahead and meet at 6:30.
Mhm.
So I guess, you know, it's a little bit tied to those 2 things.
Makes sense. So I think in terms of when we have the standalone meetings, so as per this draft calendar, we have academic standards and policy as a standalone meeting. I don't see any reason, without having glares shot at me by my administrative team, I don't see any reason why we can't start those meetings at 7 o'clock. If that's the will of the board to do so. It's a half-hour difference. So on our end, it's not a huge deal. On your end, it probably is a huge deal. And I think we all get that and certainly understand that. The bigger issue, Ms. Thomas, as you say, is when you stack meetings.
Right.
You don't want to start stacked meetings at 7 p.m.
Right.
Because
I would agree with that.
Yeah, that's the
I
bigger
would
issue. And I'm not sure what that answer is. But I think in terms of those evenings when we have a solo meeting, I think we can come to agreement based upon the conversation here to start at 7.
And the board meeting would start at 7.
The board
So the
meeting is
only thing that would
already
start
slated to
Not
start
at
at 7.
is a staff meeting.
That would be correct. Yes.
That seems fair to me. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't work perfectly for me and it doesn't, you know, it's fair. It's compromise.
Okay. Looks like we have ourselves a tentative schedule. So we will, I shouldn't say we will, the team will put that together and have that posted.
Yes.
And then obviously advertised appropriately. All right, so I thought that would be a little shorter discussion, but this one probably be a little bit longer and I think worthwhile. It's the most important. Mr. Bialik.
Okay, I'm going to read this so I don't miss any points, but I polled each board member to ascertain his or her thoughts about how to effectively conduct our committee meetings to allow to move to one formal board meeting per month, and asked about other thoughts or concerns he or she may have. So the first thing, the board overwhelmingly believes that a committee chair is needed to efficiently facilitate discussion at the committee meetings and to establish the agenda with the administration. Several members asked that the committee chairs take a more active role in controlling the flow and content in the meetings to allow for better efficiency. Most board members are in line with moving items to the consent agenda with committee approval, but most did not want a subcommittee of any size making that recommendation. That is, they wanted the entire board to be able to attend the meetings and have their say at the meeting. The feeling seems to be to allow for all members to attend and members in attendance to be polled for a consensus, allowing for a full airing of questions, concerns, and observations. Most board members want the ability for any member to pull an item from the consent agenda if one feels the need. I say most here because some board members, I think all of us want that ability and want it for our other members, but at least 2 people didn't mention it. Several members noted the necessity to limit the amount of time spent discussing items that have been previously discussed or decided. It was noted that items in the consent agenda should contain a reference, perhaps written and verbal, that referenced the committee meeting when the item was discussed, deliberated, and moved to the consent agenda. This allows for public review and review for any board member who did not attend a committee meeting. Please remember that all meetings now are recorded and available on YouTube. Most members noted the need to maintain member discipline in discussion of the topics moved to the consent agenda to avoid rediscussing an item or items already discussed in committee, unless, of course, the item is removed for the consent agenda. I will note that I repeated that, right, 2 different ways, and there's a reason for that, right, because it came up a lot. There were requests for committee meeting agendas and documentation as far in advance as possible to allow for review and adequate preparation by board members. And that's really the crux of the responses I got and the additional comments.
So maybe to restate, committee meetings would have chair people as they do today. The chairperson would work with the administrative team to prepare a detailed agenda in a more structured format than they do today, similar to how we approach board meetings with plenty of lead time and the right materials. The committee chairperson would run that committee session in a more structured way, similar to how we do board meetings here, but at the table. We would manage public comment. We would ensure that we move swiftly through the board's questions, and that we get the board members, or committee members, and that would be a committee of the whole, questions answered, discussion and deliberation is appropriate. And at the end of each agenda item, there would be a poll for consent. And assuming that there were 5 folks who were supportive, that would move into the consent agenda. Certainly not necessarily everybody would agree with that, and objections would be heard. It would be public and transparent. And then, that's where that debate would take place. So it wouldn't necessarily have to take place here at the board meeting. That's where it's kind of a summary of what the board wanted, right? So yes. I guess why don't we run around the table? We'll start at this side first and see what folks think about that. Dr. Foster, do you have a gut reaction?
It sounds like what we're doing.
It's not what we're trying to police ourselves to make the decision.
I mean, I think when I was on finance, I spent time with Bob, and he was a great partner to work with. I think in my opinion, one of the jobs of a committee person is, quote, to interpret the districts to the community, right? And so we are better gauges of how our community members think than the administration, because they are different worlds. And so to bridge those worlds between the education administration and the community this district serves is really important. So some items need different weighting within that lens. So for me, it wasn't just about, making sure that the numbers were accurate and that we're having projections. It's like, what's important here for the community to know? So, I would hope that committee people, to the extent that they have time to do it, would think, how do we create this bridge? What's our role? Because it's been a moving target. When I joined this board, the role of a committee chair was 0. It was stated that the administration prepares the agenda, does all the slides, presents everything. The committee chair basically sat there and said, okay, over to you. That was their involvement and engagement. I found it profoundly, unsatisfying. So I think we've been doing better, but it's a journey and it's a responsibility. And so that, I guess that would be my one tweak, just to say someone's a chair and they run a meeting and run an efficient meeting. That's actually, in theory, pretty easy. But to set that meeting up, to have the right content and the right emphasis, that's a little harder. That takes some work ahead of time. So that's where my head's at. Thanks.
Mr. Tate?
To comment on what Dr. Foster was saying, I mean, with our new approach, placing more importance on the committees, I think it's incumbent upon the committee chairs to be more active in shaping the agenda and making sure that the agenda and supporting materials are available 48 hours in advance, working with staff and having a well-planned meeting. And I think it's a tremendous idea. I mean, one of the first things I observed about this board when I started paying attention was that I thought committees were being underutilized. And I think this is a much smarter approach. And I know the committee chairs currently, I know Mrs. Thomas puts an awful lot of time into preparing for finance committee meetings, Mr. Grupp for facilities, and Mrs. Brooks for academic standards. And I think it's a much smarter approach to put the weight of the work on the committee than to try to do it in the full board meetings. And oh, by the way, I certainly don't think that I can possibly make every committee meeting going forward, and I don't think any of us can. And I don't think the public expects us to. I think, we'll all focus on areas where we want to put our energy, where we think our time is best spent. And I think that's a much smarter approach. We can get more focused that way. I think this is a great approach. Thank you.
Dr. Thorworth?
Well, for one, and this was one of my comments to Mark, is we're going to need to formalize these committees a little more. The chair's got to start recognizing who's going to speak. We just had an exec session and we didn't all get to speak. I mean, we need to police ourselves and, work through them. Is the plan to keep having them at the table? Okay, so, I'd like to see a more formal, I personally would like to see them in here, but I would like to see a more formal process where, the board is functioning and we separate everything out and work a little more formally. So that's all.
Ms. Brooks leading us. Ms. Brooks?
I don't really have much to add. I mean, I agree with what everybody said. I think that I just want to a point, because I'm sure you're surprised, Dr. Frazier, about the change of the times and that it didn't come up before. I think that the essence of these meetings are changed from when we approved the preliminary calendar that didn't do this. By the elimination of our 2 televised meetings puts a lot more pressure and emphasis and importance on our committees. Not that they weren't important before, but because I think it just raises the bar. There is going to be a lot more work done in them. And if we're not all on the same page, it's only going to be problematic as we go there. So I am grateful for that later start time because it could ensure more people being present and getting it done. And, I think we go with it. We're all very opinionated people. If it's not working, we'll be discussing it. So I think it's fair to go.
Ms. Thomas, last comment.
I agree with everything that's been said. I don't really have anything other than to say that we will need to be tolerant of each other in the beginning. I think that there's likely to be frustration by board members about a board member not being at a committee meeting that gets 5 votes to go on a consent agenda and shows up here, and the board member's like, yeah, I need to talk about that. And I think we're going to have to be a little tolerant of each other as we transition. I think this is something we'll get better at over time. So I hear us talking about what we think now, but I'd be hard pressed to say that if I saw something on it that I really couldn't vote for, but part of it was I listened, but I didn't get to ask my questions or whatever happens, and I felt like I needed to say something at a board meeting where you're taking a public vote on a listings, I might feel the need to talk about it. And while I think the goal is to get to a place where we're comfortable, I do think we all need to recognize this is going to be a transition. I think that the role of a committee chair is to run a meeting. I think we do that. I think we recognize board members. I think we allow public comment. We may need to look at maybe how we allow public comment, but I'm pretty sure when I'm running finance that I'm running finance. However, I'm not presenting the content. And I don't really view my role as presenting the content most of the time. Not to say it could never happen, but I don't have some philosophical thing that a chairperson should never or they should always. It should be a joint effort between the administration and the chairperson. And I think we've come to a place where most committee chairs run their meetings. But if we need to be stronger in that area, I think that's good feedback for me as a chairperson as they make sure I do that. But I do think this is going to be a transition. So this is great. We all had these opinions we gave Mark, and Mark's trying to coalesce them all. But the first meeting in October, somebody wants to pull something out of consent agenda. I feel like, don't everybody on the board have a heart attack? We need a little transition time. Let's say that we're headed in a direction, and let's try to help each other get there.
I think that's exactly right. It's going to be a work in progress. And the flip side of that argument is for somebody who doesn't agree with the will of the majority or who can't make a meeting, who has an alternative perspective, we definitely want them to be heard. But at the same time, we want those people to recognize, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. I believe we're already doing this to some extent. I think that we operate fairly well together with significant opportunities to save ourselves some time. I think as we've started to recognize the chair more in meetings, we've become more respectful of each other. So I just think this is a natural evolution of taking a look at our committee structure that could use a little bit of work to get more efficient there. Helps us with the board meetings. To Wendy's point, it really resonates that this is going to take some time. We're going to have to grow into it. We're going to have to get used to how people respond to this. And I will touch base on this in old business. But part of the conversation that we had with the IU around goal setting and a retreat, we've got some potential parts of that retreat plan that will help us as a board be able to work together as we move through this system, which will make us more aware of what we do and more supportive of each other, and hopefully help us deal with those times very efficiently and effectively. So, Mr. Bialik, I'm hearing that we've kind of got some consensus here.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to make comment, though. I'd like that, if you don't mind.
Please, thought yours built in there.
Thanks. No, I gave you the feedback of the board. Frankly, when I was going through these emails, I was disappointed when I read that we didn't want subcommittees of the board. Knowing that we can pull an agenda item or a consent agenda item, have discussion at the board meeting, move it to another agenda, another meeting night, send it back to committee if needed. With the idea of adequate prep time, I've had the pleasure of working with the MBIT, and I remember the first meeting, I thought, well, I didn't do my homework, and now because I didn't do my homework, I am just going to abstain from these votes, and I'm never going to let that happen again, right? So you learn very quickly. I would really like, my personal opinion is, I would like to see subcommittees of these of this board assigned to our committees. I would like to see the chair and 3 other members of the board volunteer for committees that have their interest and where they can commit the time. And I would like to see some level of trust of other board members that the work is going to get done in there. With knowing, of course, that on a Sunday afternoon or morning, whatever, you can watch the committee meetings on YouTube. You can view the material beforehand. And I think doing what we do now, whether it's efficient or inefficient, and I do believe it's relatively efficient, can always be better. It's not going to get us where we need to be. We can't continue to do what we're doing now. We've got to change the way we work, or all this is going to mean is that, and please don't ever tell us again how many hours we're spending in committee every year. That was one of the worst things I read today. Did you say 84 hours a year? That's, oh, please don't ever do that again. But I don't want that to be 120 next year because we made this change. Without some, if we spend 40% more of our time in meetings, we should have a drastic change in this district that just blows the doors off everything. So it's about making our time more efficient. And I'd like everybody to kind of step back and reconsider and see if we can really trust each other and have a subcommittee and make this as efficient as possible. Dr. Frazier, this is the way they worked in Westchester. I think that's the way they work in Central Bucks. These are schools about the same size and much larger than ours. So, they're good models to follow. That's all I have.
Any other comments? Any reaction to that suggestion?
It works at MBIT, but they don't have the divisions at MBIT that we have here on the board. And those divisions have been enduring for many, many years. They're not going to go away easily. The trust isn't there, and it's something we need to work on. So whatever Mr. Block's going to say about the retreat, it's a work in progress, but we're just not to that point yet. And I totally agree. If we had more trust, our meetings would be more efficient. I had people storm out on finance. I couldn't even run the meetings because I wasn't allowed to run the meetings because there was no trust and no cooperation. There's no doubt it could be better. And the district would be stronger for it, but we're just not there. No, we're not.
Can I respond to that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So my response to that, Bill, would be that a committee of 4 appointed individuals, with one being a chair, doesn't take away your voice in committee, right? You still have the ability to be there, to have comments maybe, right? So, and then you have the ability to have some discovery before the meeting, or you can pull the item from the agenda.
That's what we do at MBIT, so I understand.
Right.
I've seen it work. I've
Right.
seen it work for all the years I've been there. So I know it can work,
Right.
but it depends what the relationships are and what the level of trust are. You've identified the issue. You've identified the solution. I'm saying I agree with you. I understand what you're saying.
Go ahead, Ms. Thomas.
I also said I thought we should have assignments. For me, it was more about those are the committed people who will definitely be there. And I will make as much of the other things that I can. But if I know that Ed and Bill and Mike are going to do policy, I will certainly make every effort, or particularly if it's a topic I'm overly passionate about, or it doesn't preclude me from coming. So I don't, for me, it wasn't a trust that I have in everybody every day. Like, it was just a matter of commitment. If I say I'm a member of the finance committee, and then then pretty much I'm making finance, unless something catastrophic happens or academic stands or whatever. It was more about, we know those people are committed to be there so that we have enough people to move an item to the consent agenda. What if there happens to be a committee night and it's the committee chair and one other board person? If we don't have members, are 2 people of this board deciding what goes on the consent agenda? So I thought about it a little differently, I guess, when I answered the question. I thought about having members by saying, I'm committed to go. And if I can't make a meeting, then I might reach out to another board member, say, are you going to be there? So, but I thought the idea that 4 people would vote on it or consent for an item to go on, well, then you need to make sure 4 people are there. And although I think this board is much better than most of the other boards I've seen about having a lot of board members show up at every committee, it just could happen if you don't have assigned people. So, food for thought. That's how I took it.
Yeah, I would suggest this as a path forward because I think those are all good points. You know, I don't know if it's a lack of trust that enables us to have disagreements versus a difference in priorities. And one of the things that we're committed to doing is aligning on priorities and goals, which will guide how we tackle those. I personally, as I sit here today, I'm not a fan of having 4 named people running a committee. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, we tried it and it didn't work. Number two, it's 4 people that would vote, and if unanimous, potentially move to the consent agenda. I'm more interested in having or polling the board to know that there's a majority. And I think to date, our attendance has been really, really good, or that we haven't run into that situation too much. But I would say this because they are fair points, and I appreciate where I think Mr. Bialik is going and where I believe Dr. Foster sits, and people have passions for certain things, and scheduling, you know, makes it difficult to get to everything. I would suggest as we go through our retreat, get to dig in a little bit deeper around how we work together, how adoption of this new system takes place over the course of the next 2-3 months. We have a leadership reorganization coming up beginning of December. At our retreat, we can talk about this a little bit more. We can align on priorities to see if and what those are, and then potentially going into the next leadership cycle, we might choose to do something different across all or one of the committees. But I think for now, it probably makes sense to.
So what does happen now? What does happen if in October, some reason, people don't make finance and it's me and you there and people can't attend? Do you and I decide what items go on the consent agenda? Dr. Frazier.
If you do a 4-person committee?
What?
If you do a 4-person committee?
No, if we're going forward with this,
No, this is that hasn't happened as far back as I can remember outside academic standards.
We've certainly have had committee meetings where the first item has come up and board members do get there, but not everybody's been there when a certain topic has. Tell me if I'm wrong, Sam.
No, well, we just moved 2 meetings back to 7 o'clock too.
Yes, so, okay, but I'm just saying, if it happens,
Yeah.
well, I don't know what we do, that's all.
Yeah, and if it happens, then you know, we deal with it. The consent agenda, you know, might look
Okay.
a little bit different.
All right.
So, Ms. Brooks.
So when I answered the question about the subcommittees, I interpreted that as these are the people who can come to this committee and the others wouldn't be welcome. And so that was how I responded to that. And I said I was not in favor of that. I am not in favor of that because I would not feel comfortable at the meetings that I would not be able to attend. For me personally, I like to attend as many meetings as possible. But to Wendy's point, there have been numerous academic standards meetings, arguably because we start at 6 o'clock, where the meeting starts and I'm sitting there with one other person. So if we want to create a situation where people are assigned to each of the meetings, meaning they're making the commitment so that we know we have a minimum number of people at them, that's fine, but that is the sole purpose of that subcommittee. It doesn't make them have any more control over the agenda or influence of a discussion or anything else as anybody else who would come. But if we want to have that protection there to make sure that we have a minimum number of board members at each committee, then I would be in support of a subcommittee structure. But if it in any way changes the behavior that we've had where we can attend any meeting that we wanted and contribute as we do at any meeting, that I would not be in favor of. But to Wendy's point, to ensure a minimum amount of people so that something that gets moved to the consent agenda is actually has a sufficient number of board discussion, that I would be okay with.
I would find, at least as president today, I would struggle with, I believe I would struggle with finding 4 people committed to each of the committees to form that who could make a commitment to get to all of those for each of the 4 committees. I would want to discuss that more in retreat. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but I believe that trying to coordinate that
That's fair.
today,
We can talk about it.
into it. So I guess my point is, I believe that we should have our retreat and talk about this, get a line on
That's
the
fine.
priorities. And I think that's going to lead us to the best way based on where people's passions are.
I agree about the value of the retreat. We've discussed it. And to anybody at home who's wondering why we're having this protracted discussion about how we're going to run our meetings, it's because we can't have this discussion outside of a formal meeting properly because of the state sunshine law. So that's why we're having this, and I think it's very healthy. I want to make the point that, and I feel this very strongly, I've only been on the board for about 10 months, I guess. I have absolute trust that if I was unable to attend a finance committee meeting or a facilities committee meeting or an academic standards committee meeting, that the discussion and the attempt to reach a consensus on an issue would be handled with the best of intentions and as responsibly as possible. I mean, I don't think there's any lack of trust on this board. I don't want to sound Pollyanna-ish, but I think this is a very high-functioning group of people who have the absolute best interests of this school district at heart. I don't think there's a trust problem. I think to say that there's a trust problem is wrong. I mean, if there was a trust problem in the past, so be it. But that was the past. This is today. And I have a great deal of trust for everybody on this board. And I think that's well-founded. I feel strongly that this approach is going to work because we do have a good degree of trust and collegiality. And that's not going to be an impediment.
Anybody else? Like forward?
We're pushing this to consent agendas, and consent for this board is 5. So once we poll in these committees and you have 5 people agreeing, it's moving forward, and that's just the way it is. So I think this can go, if we don't count to 9, but we count to 5 and move, we can be much more efficient with things as we go forward.
I need clarification on that. So you could either have a subcommittee of 4, or you have a subcommittee of 5, and then you have a majority. And if I didn't mention it, no one on this board wants to vote in committee. I actually don't know if I said that. But no one on this board wants to vote in committee, right? So would you be in favor of the president appointing a 4-member subcommittee of this board to a committee?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have to tell you, then the numbers are swaying the other way now, as far as the majority of the board and what they want to do. So if you want to wait until after the retreat, I hate to say this to you, Andy, but I think we might want to wait to make this change until after the retreat, because there are some potential issues with exact scenarios like what Wendy's talking about. Now that we're talking about taking major issues and putting them on the consent agenda, if there are 2 people in a meeting, really, that constitutes no majority of anything, right? And I really don't know how we could effectively handle that. I mean, we're not voting on committee, so a quorum isn't needed, but there's got to be an understanding that if we're going to move something to the consent agenda, we trust that the committee fully vetted it and that a good number of people had some thoughts and ideas about it, and we're comfortable moving it to the consent agenda. And we're also trusting that all of our other board members looked at the material and looked at the YouTube video and did all their homework, and weren't in the situation I was in my first MBIT meeting, right? I have concerns about moving this forward without getting this fleshed out. But with, and if knowing Mike's opinion is very helpful, because you wrote, your points were very good, but you didn't answer, you didn't directly answer that question, so it's important to know. And Denise's position is different, understandably so. So now I would report that the majority of the board wants to have a subcommittee of 4.
Am I hearing that? I don't know. I'm hearing that.
Am I hearing that from 5? As long as it's open to.
Yeah.
Sure, of course it would be. You cannot, listen, it's a public meeting anyway, so it goes back to.
But I mean, the same thing can be achieved if we just say, communicate better what our calendars are in advance. Very often I'm at an academic standards meeting and somebody's not coming and I didn't know that in advance.
Yeah.
So if I could count to 5 before the meet, I don't have to necessarily be assigned to every meeting, but it's really a function of just making sure that there are 5 people. Whether that we want to call that a standing subcommittee that would go from month to month, because
I think that could change though based on people's travel.
Yeah, but
I don't think why we can't do that.
What if it's no, though? What if you take the poll and you get 3 people? Then what happens?
Well, but I mean, we have to just have people step, I mean.
Well, that's why I'm saying step up and commit, then 9 times out of 10, you're committed to attending. That's.
I think we're making this too hard. I think we've put together some guidelines that we can police ourselves, see how it works. I mean, it comes down to each of us making the effort to get to the meetings, to be prepared, to speak our piece, to make our point, and move on. I mean, but again, to go back, are there 5 people at this table who feel strongly that we should have committees, named committees of 5?
Well, that's my count.
So
Okay, well, that one.
Committees of 5 or
4.
4.
Committee of 5, I think, is a bad idea personally.
I count the 5 in terms of consent, that's what
Right, but you don't need to have a named committee of 4, okay?
Name committee of 4 would be fine. I would like to.
Versus having a chair.
No.
No, chair plus 3. Right.
Yes.
Mike, you're Mike.
Okay, just so I'm clear about what you're asking for. We've got a chair, that doesn't change. 3 people are volunteering to be part of that subcommittee. The way our policy sits today, that we can do that informally, right? Because our policy calls for either a named committee of 4 with no chair or a chair. So if I hear you saying we have a chair, and then we can have 3 people volunteer to be a subcommittee of that. Everybody else shows up. It's really.
If one of those 3 can't attend, they make sure somebody else is going to. It's just about having enough people.
Well, the key
I mean, I don't want to
the
sit.
key is having quorum, Wendy.
I know, but it's not, it's more, I'm sorry. So we're going to come to the first meeting in October. We haven't gotten together. 2 people showed up on an item. The 2 people there said put on the consent agenda. 7 people here maybe read it but weren't really sure. You're going to have everything fall off that consent agenda. You're setting yourself up for failure, in my opinion.
We are by not showing up. Shame on us.
So I don't think in the month of October, to your point of waiting for a retreat, and Mark, I don't think it's a good crisis in the month of October. Most of the time, we have well more than 3 people. I don't think for one, but ultimately, if this is a commitment for a year, sometime there's going to be a committee meeting with an agenda and only a chair and 1 other person are going to be there. And when that item comes before this board on the consent agenda, I think that will be a problem. I could be wrong, but I don't just go around here and say, I'm committed to being at finance and academic standards. You're committed to being at this. You're committed to being at this. And so, I mean, I don't, but if we feel better, and I think there's some good points to having a retreat and talking, sure, most of the public's sleeping by now, then I'm fine waiting too, because we haven't had it. But a long-term strategy needs to be that there's going to be enough people who agree to things before they end up on the consent agenda.
If this is a new vote, will
It's,
it become a comment?
Mrs. Carroll, Mrs. Carroll.
Not on the agenda.
I was going to say one thing,
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Block. Policy 005 addresses these issues, and it says that the only mandatory requirement is for a chairperson. Everything else is discretionary, so the president may appoint to the standing committees members of the board, and a member may request or refuse appointment to a committee. So it's discretionary with the exception of the chairperson, which is mandatory.
So how does this sound to kind of try and move this along? We've got committee chairs now. Why don't those committee chairs work across this board to see if they can get regular commitment of attendance of 4 or 5 or everything, and we manage it that way for now. See how it works out.
Well, I just want to clarify.
So Wendy, as chairperson of the finance committee, will poll the board about who wants to be committed to that on a regular basis, who can be there all the time and be that subcommittee. formal subcommittee, and then she can name that at her next update and say, these are the 4 or 5 or whatever that are committed to being here all the time.
I think it's a great way to handle it.
Okay. Okay,
I want to think about that.
okay.
a bit. I want the creation of these committees to occur at a public meeting. And I want to deliberate what I want, what I recommend.
What would you like?
What I recommend is that the deliberation of all of that occur here, rather than behind the scenes.
Meaning polling, who would like to be involved?
Yes. So figuring out who wants to be on what committees, and then Mr. Block, your appointment of members to those standing committees should occur here, whether that's tonight or some subsequent night. That's what I recommend.
Would you guys like to try that tonight? Okay.
There's a couple of people missing.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. So Dr. Frazier and I will figure, and so if right now here is moving to one meeting in October, we can either do it then, or can we do this in a standing committee meeting?
Yes, and you can also unfurl this new arrangement in stages, of course. So it doesn't have to occur tonight, but it should occur at either a public setting of the committee meeting, which is an advertised public meeting, or here.
Okay.
I mean, at each meeting, we could begin and just, at the first, in the new schedule. So like on October 6th, when facility starts, we could just have a discussion who would like to be on.
And that's permissible?
Yes, so at the next finance committee.
Okay, so I think that's.
Be there or be square.
Yeah, that's the plan. We're going to move to this new schedule starting the month of October. With each first committee meeting, the committee chair will solicit input for subcommittee people, and we'll name those at that point. Okay? Okay. So kind of ironic now that, and thank you everybody for your input for the discussion. Truly shows the evolution we need to make in working together, but kind of ironic now that we move to the consent agenda. And Dr. Foster, if you could please read.
I move the consent agenda items A through F as contained in the attachments to the agenda, subject to audit.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorward. Mr. Biley?
Here.
Don't touch my stuff.
Give him that one.
Yeah, item D, approval of treasurer's report. I'll be voting no for that.
Anything else? A roll call vote, please.
Mr. Tate,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas,
Yes.
Dr. Thorwart,
Yes.
Mr. Block,
Yes.
Mr. Bialik,
Yes, with the exception of item D, approval of treasurer's report.
Mrs. Brooks.
Yes.
Dr. Foster.
Yes, except for item A, where I'm taking a pass.
So that motion passes 7-0 with 2 exceptions. Thank you. Mr. Tate, number 1, please.
I move to approve Board Policy 006, Local Board Procedures and Meetings, as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Thorward. Questions for Mr. Tate, Mr. Cox, Dr. Frazier? Okay, hearing no objections, I'd ask the Secretary to record the motion as passing with unanimous consent. Number 2, Mrs. Thomas, please.
I move to approve the personnel actions and the fall EDRPP listings as contained in the attachments to this agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. Any questions for Ms. Trioli? Dr. Thorwald?
1, thank you. Thank you for putting it in Excel. I mean, a PDF is like papyrus to me. Excel is, and I appreciate it. Dr. Frazier, Andy did it as well with the busing. And thank you. It makes it much easier to work with. So that's all.
Any other questions? Hearing no objections, I'd ask the Secretary to record the motion as passing with unanimous consent. And if we could move to number 3, Ms. Brooks, please.
I move to approve the 2016-2017 Council Rock School District school bus lists as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
Second, please.
Second.
Ms. Dr. Thorwald, quicker on the button. Any Any questions for the administration? Hearing no objections, ask the secretary to note the motion approved with unanimous consent. Moving to number 4, Mr. Bialik, please.
I move to award emergency generator inspection and maintenance bid number 16-49 to S&S Electrical Services Incorporated at the total cost of $18,450, subject to audit.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Any questions for Mr. Taylor?
This is just routine maintenance.
Yeah, it's an annual maintenance and
Hearing no objections, I'd ask the secretary to record the motion as passing with unanimous consent. Sorry, Dr. Thorwart, you drew the short straw tonight. Could you
Thanks.
please take the next 3 together?
Sure. I move to approve change order GC-01 to TE Construction Services LLC for bid package number 1, bid number 16-11, modular classroom removal and site restoration at deduct cost of $46,400, subject to audit. I further move to approve change order GC-01 to TE Construction Services LLC for bid package number 5, bid number 16-47, Richboro Elementary School ceiling replacement at a deduct cost of $1,580, subject to audit. And lastly, I move to approve change order GC-01 to Walter Brucker and Company Incorporated for bid package number 4, bid number 16-14, miscellaneous general construction projects at deduct cost of $32,294.95, subject to audit.
Second.
Mr. Bialik, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Hearing no objections, I'd ask the secretary to note the motion passes with unanimous consent. We'll go to number 6. Dr. Foster, please.
I move to award Coral Riser's bid number 16-52 to Wenger Corporation at the total cost of $12,916.08, subject to audit.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bialik. Any questions for the administration? Hearing no objections to Coral Risers, I would ask the secretary to note the motion passes with unanimous consent. And finally, Mr. Tate, number 7, please.
I move to award air filter bid number 16-51 to Advanced Air Service Group at a total cost not to exceed $25,006.45, subject to audit.
Second.
Mr. Bialik.
Yes.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Hearing no objections, I'd ask the secretary to note the motion passes with unanimous consent. Concludes our motion agenda tonight. Mr. Cox, Solicitor's report, please.
Can I ask a question before we move on to the Solicitor's report, Mr. President? Are the items that we just approved through all those motions an example of something that would go on consent agenda and save a tremendous amount of time?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Block, just to follow up on the comments I made earlier, when the appointments for the standing committees shake out, that final appointment should be made by you at a regular board meeting, whether it's in October or subsequent. So as that all shakes out, those formal appointments should be made by you so that the district is in line with policy 005. There was, in addition to that, an executive session before tonight's meeting on the topics of potential construction litigation and the acquisition of real estate. There will be an executive session following the meeting on the same topics. That's all I have, Mr. Block.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. We'll move to board items. We'll start with old business. I'll take that as a follow-up to our conversation about retreat and board goals. Dr. Frazier, Mr. Cox, excuse me, Mr. Bialik and myself met with Joanne Parati of the IU as well as the solicitor at the IU and reviewed different formats with which they've facilitated board retreats in the past. So what we are recommending is a board retreat on a Saturday morning, which will include a fairly significant agenda to be followed by our alignment on goals, which will be a discussion that will take place in public at a board meeting. I will send out an email to board to solicit dates with suggested agenda and prep work, and we'll move from there. So we'll look to schedule that retreat on a Saturday in the coming months. The goal discussion, just to manage expectations, may not be a single session. It might be a series of sessions to get to where we need to be. And then, do you have any comments, Mr. Bodick? You were at that meeting, so.
Yeah, no, I'll just say that it became clear that the goals conversation is something we have to have in public. And it also became clear that it was a much longer than one meeting topic to be effective. My suggestion was to try to work that into Thursday nights, so we're not having another meeting, but that may have been a really terrible suggestion. So I know everyone kind of won't be excited about the idea of meeting at 4 Saturdays to have this discussion. So we'll have to try to see how we work it out. But I think if we're going to be serious about this, then that's the only way to do it, is to have a series of meetings.
Any new business or any other old business, actually? Well, about there. Okay, any new business? Okay, committee reports. Academic standards, please, Ms. Brooks.
So I have to look on the sheet. Our next meeting is on October 13th at 7 p.m. and the topic will be PLCs.
Excellent. Mr. Grubb is not here for the facilities committee meeting. We had that this week. We worked through the agenda. Nothing worth noting, Mr. Taylor? Okay, Mrs. Thomas, finance?
Finance will be September 22nd. We will be looking at the list of contractors we go to RFP for and getting an update in the money manager custodial bank agreement.
Mr. Tate, policy?
Policy committee's next meeting will be October 27, and Dr. Fraser has asked Mr. Frederickson to work with policy committee. Tomorrow afternoon, he and I are doing a 1.5 hour webinar with the people at PSBA to learn about their online system. And then Matt and I will do sort of we'll train the trainer thing, or we'll be available to help board members also use the system so that we'll all have access online to the policy changes that are coming down the pike from PSBA. They've already completed review of the first section, so we'll be off and running.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. Dr. Foster, Ms. Thomas, anything from NBIT?
We met this past Monday. We had a presentation on the first days of school, which looked like they had gone very well at NBIT, off to a good start. We had a presentation on goals and objectives for the year, and also those related to revised comprehensive plan. And you'll be happy to know one of the items of work will be to focus on student recruitment, and also enhance communication with school districts, including better communication around IEPs, easier application process, online applications, and to embark on a more robust program evaluation and revision to meet labor market needs and also student development needs. And then there were many other items. We moved through them very quickly. And one of them was pulled from the consent agenda because it was actually surprisingly controversial. And so one of the members on the NBIT board is the president-elect for PSBA, and he serves as a member of the Centennial School Board. And he was asking, had entered into the agenda that we at NBIT approve PSBA's principles of governance and leadership. And these are, things like advocate earnestly, promote public education, champion education by engaging members of local, state, and federal legislative bodies, lead responsibly, prepare for, attend, and actively participate in board meetings, work together in a spirit of harmony, respect, and cooperation.
Hey, Dr. Foster, I'm sorry, could you talk into the mic a little bit more? Thank you.
So, there's a lot of good, reasonable content to these governance suggestions that PSBA is trying to promote. And yet, what happened, and I think it's interesting because what happened is some of the members actually were not supportive. And they gave some examples of some of the things that they had reservations about. And one of the examples given was under the category of plan thoughtfully. And so adopt and implement a collaborative comprehensive planning process, including regular reviews, set annual goals that are aligned to the plan. And I bring this up because PSBA has a lot of work to do, and I think school boards across the Commonwealth have a lot of work to do to define what a school board actually is, because the difference of opinion were there were members there that believed that that's not the role of the school board to do that kind of planning and goal setting, that really it resides with the administration. And honestly, when I joined the school board, that was solidly the culture at Council Rock. And so you could see that division, that disagreement, it doesn't just happen here. It happens among the different sending districts. So Central, the members of Central Bucks were very supportive of that kind of stuff, and certainly we were. But boards approach this thing differently, and it takes a lot of effort to have a vision and to create goals and to own them, and then to not just sit back and say, you know what, tell us what you came up with, and we'll tell you whether we like it. There's more to it than that. The SBA recognizes that, put them in. Anyway, the thing passed. We had at least 5 votes for it. It passed. And it's really just a pledge. It's not legally binding. It's just saying, these things are great to do. Evaluate continuously, utilize appropriate data to make informed decisions, communicate clearly, promote open, honest, and respectful dialogue among the board, staff, and community. There's a lot of good ideas here. That's all. But it was interesting that there was that conflict over goal setting. So.
Dr. Foster. Ms. McKessie is not here. I'm sure she will update us via email with any IU news, anything from the Council Rock Education Foundation, Mr. Biley.
There's a lot going on, actually, and I would encourage anyone who's interested to go to creducationfoundation.org to give you an idea. October 7th, Council Rock District-wide Glow-in-the-Dark Dance is on the website. Parenting in the 21st Century is the kickoff presentation for the Raising Great Kids program. And that will be presented by Dr. Christina Carson-Sacco. Sacco? Okay. I just looked to you because I think you know all these things. November 25th is a Council Rock alumni reunion at La Stalla. They're giving us the whole restaurant for, I believe it's 4 to 6. There is a small fee this year. I think it's $10. It might be $15. Again, we had 110 or more people last year. It was a wonderful time. And there is a Outstanding Community Partner Award program on November 16th honoring Dr. Beth Dupree. So again, you can find the details at creducationfoundation.org.
Thank you, Mr. Biley. We'll move to our second round of public comment.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. I'd like to remind the board that when you go down to one meeting, if you decide in the middle of the meeting that you're going to vote on an item that wasn't on the agenda, then I believe there has to be public comment on that specific item, which is what I was asking for, because it looked like you were going to go for a vote on the subcommittee. So in the past, Council Rock has had subcommittees. They were subcommittees that had 3 members. A chair and 2 others. That reorganization, the board president would ask who was interested in what committees. This divided up the work of the board. There are no votes taken at subcommittee meetings. It is used as a way to give the administration feedback on the items they are going to present at the next board meeting, whether it's ready for prime time or it needs thus and thus to be ready for prime time, or there's not enough information to go ahead and forward. And then when those items from the facility meeting would come up, the board president would say to the facilities chair, you've looked this over and the facilities committee approves, and they would say approved, there was trust there, and it would go forward. So the board members only get into the minutia of the committees that they're on, and they divide the work. Besides your subcommittees, you have the IU, you have the Education Foundation, you have a lot of jobs. And if you want to make your work easier, then you only should have 3 people on these subcommittees. And sometimes you need like 2 for the IU and 2 for whatever. You're driving the work. And it's never going to negate the person that doesn't trust. There's always going to be a board member who wants to litigate everything that was discussed at the subcommittee meeting. Then it's up to the president to say, this was discussed. You could have heard and been there and stopped the conversation when you go to one meeting. Then there will always be the person who gives no input. That's what's going to happen. There's 9 members of the board. But I believe you should go to 3 and not 4, and you should divide the work up and not make yourself crazy. So still there'll be a lot of jobs. You're still going to have to do 2 or 3 things a month. It's just that you'll get into what you're going to do and make sure you're at those meetings. I asked again for utilization of the TV to have some of these subcommittees televised on a rotating basis, or to have academic standards, which parents are interested. And you never said when the special meetings will take place. I assume you're going to have to look for an alternative date. And there's also the technology committee, which I hope some board members would come to. We met for a whole year, and we are no closer to a 5-year plan than we were this time this year. And there will always be things like that that come up besides what you're signing up for. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. All right. Is there any further public comment? Is there any board comment? Ms. Brooks.
I have 2 quick items. One is, following the last academic standards meeting, I had a little email exchange with Kathy Strauss, the director of MBIT, because I wanted to share with her how incredibly impressive her presentation was, and it was certainly an engaging conversation. And it led to a string of comments where, while I have been several times to Aspirations, the restaurant there, I actually have never personally taken a tour of the building, which she then extended an invitation to me. And so I just wanted to announce it to the board. If anyone is interested in taking a tour of MBIT, please email me your dates and I'll coordinate something so that Kathy Strauss is not taking us around multiple times. And then the other thing is, as many of you know, I'm very involved with the Council Rock Relay for Life. It is an event that's very near and dear to me. And we'll talk about that more because I'd like to have another Council Rock team when the event takes place next spring. But in the meantime, on Saturday, October 22nd, we are having Bark for Life, where at Council Rock South, in an effort to raise money for the American Cancer Society from 10 a.m. to noon, there will be an event to bring your dogs for the walk. Anyone wants to come and see my impossibly cute dogs, please do. The cost is $15 for 1 person and 1 dog, $25 for 1 person and 2 dogs. Or if you're not a dog owner, but you would just like to come and see all the adorable doggies, that is $10 per person. So it's going to be a super fun time just to see the community out walking their dogs, and I hope people will come out.
Is there any other board comment? Any other board comment there? No.
Mark, were you going to make a comment?
No, not now.
No, I'm not going to do it. Okay.
Did anybody anything else? I do have one quick thing I want to share. A message popped up across my screen here from a member of the public watching that said, "This right now, right here, is why you are all going to heaven." Meeting adjourned.
Bueno.